Greetings and welcome to this week's edition of Faith to Live By, where I help us explore current events from a biblical and prophetic perspective so we, as God's children, can know how He wants us to respond. I'm Pam Christian, the researcher, writer, producer, and host of this weekly podcast, and I want to sincerely thank you for allowing me to be among those you listen to in your quest to know what is true and right in this evil world we live. If you've been listening for any length of time, then you know I have faithfully proclaimed we have many promises from God in His written word, the Bible, and through His prophetic words that must always be confirmed by the Bible, for us to remain hopeful that God is intervening in our behalf to not only deliver us, but set us free from the evil and tyranny we've been enslaved to. And again today, I bring that same encouragement with part 2 of my interview with Dr. Scott Young. If you did not hear part 1, I highly encourage you to listen to it because we provided the background of how the United States has come to the point it is, while providing you with verifiable evidence of the existence of an evil shadow government that has been at work to undermine the foundation of the United States, a foundation clearly built on the Bible and wholly submitted to the God of the Judeo-Christian faith. The whole reason our founding fathers worked to establish a constitutional republic for the United States of America was to create a government that was consistent with the truth, freedoms, and promises for prosperity God has revealed He wants for His people, unlike governments of Europe, specifically Britain, that combined their version of religion and government into tyrannical control over the people. In the days we live, the very foundation of our nation and the Christian faith have been under a long-term systematic attack, with evil winning various victories over the past 150-plus years. The victories were strategically planned to be subtle, to overturn our nation and all its morals, values, and ethics incrementally until it reached a point that we, the unsuspecting people, would have no ability on our own to fight for the restoration of our country and all it stood for. However, the evil effort to gain control over people has not been limited to the United States. It has been widely practiced worldwide among those who seek global governance, power, and control. This pattern of evil, ever working to overturn everything that represents God of the Judeo-Christian Bible and overcome God's people, has played out in humanity time and time again. The Bible clearly reveals Satan's only goal is to gain control over the world in his effort to dethrone God. And in fact, the Bible reveals there will be a day when Satan, through the Antichrist, establishes a one-world government. But this is not that time. A very dear friend of mine and I were talking about the prophetic and how the supernatural gift is woefully under attack today. You know, God expects us to test every spirit. He has specifically instructed us to test every spirit, to test every claim that is presented to be from God. God informs us the enemy masquerades as an angel of light, which is how he is able to persuade people away from God and into false doctrines. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 4, the Bible shares a story how some people like one preacher over another, while others preferred yet another preacher, even though all the men preaching were genuine men of God. We must use utmost maturity when accepting or discounting those who profess to speak and teach for God. We cannot overlook the efforts of Satan to bring lies and to confuse people about truth. But neither can we be too quick to dismiss a man or woman who claims to prophesy. We need to use sound proof tests. First, those speaking and teaching for God can be accepted if what they say aligns with the written word of God. Second, if what they say is proven true over a period of time. And keep in mind, there are many prophecies by Old Testament prophets that are still pending fulfillment. And third, they can be trusted if what is prophesied includes warnings only if it also includes a way of escape, a way of hope. And then we have more evidence that what is said is from God. God never gives a word without also providing a way of escape from His judgment. With my podcasts, I quote many different prophets, And I'm aware some people like some of them and not others. But I'm not bringing their prophecies to you with the claim that they are 100% correct. I bring their prophecies to you because I see merit in them and believe they are worthy of additional consideration and prayerful scrutiny. We are each unique and we are created with various preferences. God warns us not to let our preferences or our differences interfere with our ability to rightly discern and receive truth. It is the responsibility of each and every one of us to individually discover, test, and embrace truth. Remember, it is when people accept what they hear instead of scrutinizing it for themselves that leads to deception. For example, there are many genuine Christians who have been taught that the supernatural gifts we read about in the Bible are not available for God's children today. This is a very sad and deceptive doctrine that originated from the pit of hell. Please think about it. Of course the enemy of God would do all he can to make Christians not only believe they cannot access the supernatural powers Jesus actually taught the early disciples to wield, but to also believe Satan doesn't really exist. There are many researched reports that reveal a large number of Christians don't believe in a literal devil, they don't believe in hell, and they don't believe in the spiritual gifts being available today. Additionally, they believe much of the Bible is folklore and has no bearing on life today. This is actually evidence of Satan's successful strategies to overcome God's people with his lies and deceptions that are so artfully presented they initially seem right, and that's all Satan needs to get another victory in his overall scheme. Anyone adult alive today who has lived through world events, especially since 2020, who is even halfway conscious, would have to admit evil has been allowed to increase in our lifetimes like never before and in ways far greater than we realized. And as I've also said many times, the reason Satan ever succeeds is because God's people are ill-informed, apathetic, disengaged, and are themselves attracted to the ways of the world more than the ways of God. However, also, according to the patterns documented in the Bible, when just a remnant of God's people cry out to him in repentance, interceding on behalf of God's people everywhere, God hears their cries and immediately intercedes to deliver them and heal them. This is precisely what we've been living through, especially since 2016. The widely unexpected upset of the 2016 presidential election was the beginning of God being evident in answering our prayers. Donald John Trump, being elected president, allowed God to reveal all manner of evil in our government and how evil people bent on a one-world government had been secretly advancing their agenda and how they came dangerously close to accomplishing their goals. Recognizing that President Donald Trump, along with his supporters, have the potential of preventing them from achieving their goals, the evil establishment that's been fully operational within our United States government for hundreds of years set out to do everything possible to destroy him. Even though Satan and his followers know God exists, they are disillusioned by their own drive into believing they can overcome God. In truth, they can't, and they won't. Not now, not ever. Picking up where we left off last week, I now want to share with you part 2 of my interview with Dr. Scott Young. You will hear him make some claims that may be very hard to believe. This is why I spent so much time last week explaining cognitive dissonance. Also, I'm not asking you to believe everything you hear from him or hear me say. I want you to allow this podcast to be an instrument of God to encourage you to get engaged and learn truth for yourself. After I play this part of the interview, I'll come back and shed some light on specific events that have taken place since the re-election of Donald Trump as President of the United States, so we can know more about what God is doing and what he wants us to do in partnership with him to see his kingdom will done on earth as it is in heaven. Now here's part 2 of my interview with Dr. Scott Young.
So instead of throwing the baby out with the bathwater and trying to redesign every little piece of the time frame, what we're saying is, what were the goals of World War I, for instance? And that actually gives you more definition of things that we know occurred in World War I.
And it gets back to following the money.
Right.
And it gets back to these 13 families. It's really amazing how simple it is when we get enough facts to put all the pieces together. Now, there had to be a point in time that enough, I'll say, white hat people, whether they're military, whether government, no matter who they are, realized what was going on. And they had to decide at that point to take advantage of what the forefathers wrote in the Constitution, that when we have a rogue government, the military becomes the leadership, so to speak. Can you address that?
Yeah, so there's a couple levels of that. It starts from JFK's killing. Okay, so that happens in November of 63, right? And some people will say, well, JFK didn't die. That is absolutely fundamental to our point here. It's foundational to the level of what happens. And that is that beginning of the Q movement. And people don't even understand what the heck that means. There's some really interesting references. Once you understand that to have nuclear capability means that you have Q clearance. And so when people don't put that together, the movie Oppenheimer talks about that. That one of his superiors, the general that's over him, he finally goes, oh, by the way, you get your Q clearance today. And he kind of dropped a card on him. And later on in the movie, as they're trying to rail Oppenheimer out, probably in the later 50s, they take away his Q clearance. And so you got to ask yourself the question, what's the deal with Q clearance? And why do we have this conversation of Q? It's nuclear level clearance. It doesn't mean that you have 100% top level clearance. There are people who are sergeants who have Q clearance with that too.
Okay.
And so that's an interesting part that people are kind of missing in that conversation.
And it's just like putting a puzzle together. We have all the pieces around us. They're scattered on the table.
Right.
And we've only got a few pieces that are fitting together to help us see the picture, but we're yet to see the whole picture. Now, this brings me to another question I wanted to ask you, and I'm leading up to your area of expertise, which is financial, NESARA, GESARA. I'm leading up to that. I'm trying to help my audience have the background. But would you say that it is accurate that the white hat military, who now wants to protect our constitutional republic, approached Donald Trump originally to run in 2016?
Yeah, actually, I heard about this in 2014 when it was happening. And because I had some people who were some real interesting white hat plant, and they just happened to be in my life. This one guy was talking to me about it. I'm looking at him like, isn't that the guy that says you're fired? And I sort of knew some Trump issues, but I didn't know a lot about him, right? And I'm like, that's just crazy. He's never even run for governor or whatever. I don't remember how I said it. And the reality is they were ready to take out Obama under a military coup. And they said the better way of doing this is bringing on someone like Trump because he had been bankrupted. Now, that's a key point that people don't catch. He'd been bankrupted several times because he would never bow to the cabal. And see, they tried to trap him with Epstein. Most people don't get that. Yeah, Epstein and he, in the very early days, they were playboy types, right? And they were around each other. But as soon as Trump knew what Epstein was about, he kicked him out of everything out there. And so that's where the military was looking at this going, hey, we've got a guy here that we think can lead the nation. And because he's a billionaire on his own, he doesn't necessarily need money like a Kamala, a Joe, Obama, whatever kind of thing. Those are the corruptibles that we look at.
The further we get into this, the more brilliance we see. Now, one of the things that I've had trouble understanding, and I know Derek Johnson does a good job of explaining it, but he still loses me because he's got so much military background that I don't have. But
Right.
He explained, and I understand, that Joe Biden is the president. Joe Biden was not properly inaugurated. And he explains that Donald Trump, since 2020, has been the commander-in-chief and a wartime president. Can you help me and my audience better understand that?
So I think that was one of the weirder parts, because we all thought, hey, Trump's going to win in 2020. And we had proof that he won. If you watch Election Fraud by Mike Lindell, you see Dinesh D'Souza's part about the 2000 Mules. And now we're seeing it today, by the way, because we saw the election, that was as many as 20 million more voters are in the middle of 2020. And do you know that there are lefty Reddit posts of people going, I don't get it, that Joe Biden one had many more votes, and so did Trump in 2020. And they go, aha, I gotcha. And that's the key that they're missing in that point. So reality is, I think it's in South Carolina, Joe Biden gets fifth. I mean, no one's ever gotten fifth in his own primary and should have won. I mean, I would have picked 100 other people, including Tulsi Gabbard, who was running at the same time frame. They were given Joe Biden because he was massively compromised. He was known as an idiot. Obama just poo-pooed him every single time that they were around. And, Kamala only had 1% in 2020. If you go back and look at it in her primaries, she had 1%. She never won anything in 2024. The people haven't spent time and just said, why Joe Biden? It's because we know for a fact he was a sex trafficker. And so what they had is just an actor. There's a movie that people need to watch that will be very powerful for them. It's called Dave.
Dave?
Dave, D-A-V-E. Okay. And the movie Dave, it's in the 90s that this came out. And the main president comes down ill after he's having an affair. And they find an actor that looks exactly like him, and they install him into the White House. The movie has cabal references everywhere when you realize it. And then finally the guy dies, and they basically bury the actor back in the world with this stuff too. It is the way that they did it in the Joe Biden era. Most people have understood that he probably was dead in 2019. And so, not only do you not have a Joe Biden, the whoever guy that's in there isn't even the person that should have won because they won under fraudulent means. Forget about the other fraudulent points. That isn't even the same guy. And we have the same exact thing with Kamala. She's got masks on. And you go, you don't understand. What they did is violated their oaths of office. And then other people say, well, yeah, but they didn't sign their oaths of office. It doesn't matter. If I act like a president or a mayor or whatever, and I don't sign the oath of office, it doesn't negate me from the one issue that I'm doing is treason.
Well, it's impersonating somebody else, and on all kinds of levels, that's illegal. And,
Right.
and that's one of the things I've really enjoyed is that Donald Trump and the White Hats have been using the law, following the letter of the law. And so they will, in the end, be able to come out of all of this. Now, hopefully we've put enough puzzle pieces together for me and my audience. I feel a little better at this point, I have to tell you. And now I want to get into how this ties in to changing the monetary system. Through the prophets, God has said that we've been living under a Babylonian system and we've been enslaved. And we can understand that now more and more as we're seeing that these people who wanted a one world government only see us as chattel to help them get richer.
Sure.
But what I can recall is that once upon a time in my lifetime, the dollar was gold back.
Sure.
And I think that was discontinued under Nixon. And then the dollar became a fiat dollar or a petrodollar. And now there's movement for the dollar to become something else. And again, it has to do with world economy. And we've heard a lot about the nations signing up with the BRICS currency. Help us understand how all of that fits in leading up to what we are most excited about, which is NESARA or GESARA, which is coming up.
So without going through all the different points of how they ripped away the gold standard, because there's like several issues that happen in there. It's funny that Donald Trump's person that he wanted to lead the Fed in 2019 is Judy Shelton. She wrote a book called Good as Gold that you guys could always check it out. I believe she wrote it in 2023. She updated a little bit because she couldn't get anyone to do it. Guess when she launched the book? In October of 2024. What a time that she's doing it. And she has been a long proponent of having a gold-backed currency through the Fed. Now, we know that the Q conversation also says, and this is why most people don't struggle with NESARA and Q. They go, well, Q didn't talk about it. Yes, he did. He said, gold will destroy the Fed. That is foundational. Truthers out there don't believe in NESARA because they don't believe different points. And I go, I've asked two questions of those same people. Number one, do you believe in a gold-backed currency? Yes. Number two, do you believe the Fed should go down? Yes. You've got the foundation of the gold-backed currency and NESARA GESARA. Because once those things happen, you also have to deal with at the same time. You can't just turn those things over without fixing elections. You can't turn those over without making two terms. You can't fix those without fixing the bar and the legal situations because they have been corrupting it for so long. NESARA GESARA is so big, it's not even funny. Now, BRICS nations starts in 2009. Well, it's funny because at the same time, Bitcoin starts with a weird dude, Satoshi, who comes on and writes some paperwork about a blockchain. But at the same exact time frame, the quantum financial system started as well. And it's started because when the White Hats tried to bring in as much as $83 trillion through the Fed, because they were trying to release it, NESARA for America, and they stole it. So the cabal stole it. And so one of the things that happens at the same time that you got the BRICS nations going in 2009, the Bitcoin is going as a blockchain that is easily trackable, and the quantum financial system comes in as a distributed ledger blockchain, but no one knew anything about it. And so we move forward into 2022, the BRICS nations show up. And here's the funny thing about them. As soon as BRICS started being more formal in 22, and that's why we almost all of us thought that this would happen in 22, because BRICS was going. And so they had to demonize the BRICS nations. And all economists love demonizing the BRICS nations. And that's the whole point of Russia and Ukraine, is Russia's always bad. So we have to have every movie, every little thing that shows Russia is a bad thing, and China is a bad thing too. There are bad things in every single country. Don't get me wrong with that. But they actually went gold-backed, but we don't actually see it. And so we're going, wait a second, if they're already gold-backed, they are. They have their central bank, but they know that it's going away. And so they've been moving, and what the real information is, it's all the nations have actually signed up with the BRICS nations. So BRICS is GESARA, or the Global Economic Stabilization and Reformation Act.
Okay, when you say all have signed up with BRICS, what do you mean?
All the nations, 209 nations, they've all signed up already. And most people don't realize that, because on the outer edge, we hear about 49, 62, whatever number that they're coming up with. Sounds like a football play. But the point is that they really have signed up all the nations because they had to do that, because we couldn't just do NESARA for America, because the nations kept messing with it. Back to your original point, the Vatican is this religious hub that is actually, the Vatican started banking in so many different ways. They corrupted banking many times. Then you have London. The city of London is a 1 mile radius spot that no one's ever really, they've walked by, but they've never really spent time in it. And it does the financial part. And then DC, with all of its cabal references, it does the governance part. And it all comes back to those.
All right. So if you say all the nations have signed on to a gold-backed dollar, part of the purpose of that is, of course, to be able to do global trading. Is that correct?
Right. So, but instead of having a global dollar or a global whatever currency point, they never wanted to have that. So the quantum financial system is just a driver. It's just a computer program that calculates the amounts. So we'll just use Venezuela with their bolivar that has been massively inflated. I mean, people wallpaper their walls and their apartments with that stuff. That's just how bad the currency is. And we're feeling that right now, by the way, too. We're feeling some level of that. But what happens is that we need to bring Venezuela by herself, not with a global group, okay? We need to bring her into sovereign nature of being a wealthy country. And when we see that, what we do is we tell through the BRICS nation that, okay, no one can attack Venezuela or the rest of the nations are going to attack you. That's part of this quantum financial system that's happening. So each one of those nations are purely sovereign. They'll have their own sovereign currency and balanced with one another. So we had to raise their currencies up and balance them between them.
Okay, now when you say no one can attack Venezuela in this example, do you mean like a military attack?
Yeah, a military attack or like the CIA would do. They would take out the leader, they put in the right leader, they would make them, a detonation to them, which means you have to release everyone's debts, their governmental debts and their private debts, because those private debts are paying back the cabal bankers.
Okay, to keep us from getting too far into the weeds, since Dr. Scott has taught on this for years and he somewhat expects us to connect the dots, I want to stop here and do my best to bring clarity. And if at this point I don't cover a question you have, by all means, send me an email to pose your question and I'll try to cover it for you with the next podcast. Okay, back to the point of our founding fathers providing a way for our government to continue in the event of a rogue administration. According to the United States Declaration of Independence, when our government becomes destructive to the people's rights, the people have the responsibility to alter or abolish the government and institute a new government, essentially meaning they can overthrow the rogue government and establish a new one if necessary. The Declaration states that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, meaning that the people are the source of authority and can withdraw that consent if the government becomes tyrannical. In the context of a new experimental democratic republic, the Founding Fathers believed that subordination of the military to the authority of civil masters was critically important to prevent the emergence of a new form of tyranny or dictatorship. For this reason, the president who is elected is recognized as the commander-in-chief over the military. Now, I'm not saying what follows is something I have completely understood, but I'm doing my best to learn from Dr. Scott Young and Derek Johnson and others, and there are many more puzzle pieces we are yet to see. So at this point, I will postulate a possible explanation of our recent state of government with the caveat that you will better understand this if you have listened to part 1 of my interview with Dr. Scott Young. Okay, what if honest United States military leaders, recognizing the near takeover of the rogue government, drew on the proper interpretation of the Constitution and our laws and orders, and sought to properly place the military under the control of the United States citizens? To that end, they recruited Donald Trump to run for president for the 2016 election. As president, Donald Trump would assume the position of commander-in-chief over the military, and together they would work entirely according to the law to expose the rogue government and establish new leadership in its place that would be properly serving the people. As president, Donald John Trump signed several executive orders, including Executive Order 13848, signed September 2018, in which he recognized a national threat to our nation, therefore declaring a national state of emergency, making Donald Trump a wartime president, affording him unique authority under such a threat. To this day, Executive Order 13848 has not been revoked, which seems to mean we are still under a national state of emergency. While the charades of the 2020 election played out, the white hat military had all the evidence necessary to prove election fraud, but needed more events to be exposed to more fully deal with the extent of corruption. With a fraudulent election and Trump not ceding the election, under emergency conditions, he legally remained commander-in-chief. Donald John Trump and the white hat military intentionally allowed the evil shadow government to continue their charade, knowing in the end anything this illegitimate government did would not stand. In the meantime, according to law, men and women suspected of treason were given fair trial under the Navy, who oversees such trials, and they were properly judged and in some cases were put to death. Then, what if actors were put in their place to play the part of the executed traitors without their evil cronies knowing, to further expose the corrupt government under the D.C. Corporation of the United States fraudulent government, exposing bad guys as they continued to unfold their evil plans? Then, with the 2024 election, considering the overwhelming legitimate votes for Trump, notwithstanding the illegitimate votes that were cast for others who will ultimately be caused to surrender their illegally assumed positions of power, the military is now continuing to let the shadow government expose themselves until such time as sufficient evidence is amassed to convince the United States citizens and the people of the world that the long-standing effort to take over the United States government in favor of a one-world government was the sad reality we'd been living under for decades upon decades, meaning the whole world would be fully supportive of the white hat covert action and willing to have justice completely served. Okay, now beyond the United States, what if, during Donald John Trump's first term, the white hat military and Donald Trump convinced the nations of the world with what was called Donald Trump's capitulation tour, who were also working to overthrow the United States in favor of a one-world government, that if they did not comply with the restoration of the United States government, if they continued to oppose the restoration, they would be subject to their own demise according to international law. Whew, that was really difficult for me to concisely explain, but I think I did a good job, and it remains to be seen if this is a correct summary, but I think it is. During the interview, when I asked Dr. Scott about the rogue government, he jumped way ahead and wanted us to know the exposure of all of this evil started with President John F. Kennedy. So, while the white hat military and Donald Trump are working to expose evil governments, corrupt elections, senseless wars, fraudulent judicial and legal systems, and self-serving career politicians, they are also cleaning up the economic and financial systems. Dr. Scott explained how BRICS is actually a precursor to NESARA, GESARA, how blockchain and the quantum financial system play into the soon-to-be experienced National and Global Economic Stabilization Reformation Act. Now, moving into news topics that are prominent today. I think the unusual announcements of President Trump's cabinet members and more are all part of a brilliant strategy to send the evil cabal into greater panic, thereby causing them to turn on one another to save their own hides, that will allow the white hats to round up all the bad guys from the top to the lowest of the pecking order. On the lighter side, I read where all of what's been taking place has resulted in a new extended cruise being uniquely available. Vie Residences Cruise announced its Tour La Vie program, which is a 4-year world cruise for those who want to escape the Trump presidency. This is a real thing. You can even find the link in the show notes. I guess some can escape by way of voluntary round-trip travel, whereas many others will escape by way of a one-way ticket to Gitmo. There's so much going on right now, so I again invite you to connect with me on any of my social media accounts where I post several times a day in keeping with headline news. Please note that God continues to reveal the unrelenting evil plans of those who are guilty of serious wrongdoings, seeking to do anything possible to prevent Donald Trump from being inaugurated. Be in regular prayer for his protection, the protection of his family, his cabinet, and all whom God approves to be part of Donald Trump's new administration. Also, be encouraged by the prophecy God has given through Barry Wunsch, who wants us to call forth what God has promised, that we are entering the rebirth of our nation, and by extension, all the nations of the world. Next week will be Thanksgiving week for us here in America. and the week where my third and final interview with Dr. Scott for this session will be posted. You won't want to miss it, as this is when Dr. Scott shares more about NESARA, GESARA, and how it will not only reset the world economies, but result in economic freedoms for all of us, all around the world, such as we've never before known. Never forget, all of this is God answering our prayers, profoundly blessing us, all for our benefit, and all for His glory. Now, I ask you to listen to my announcements and take advantage of the many goods and services I bring you in an effort to at least cover the cost of this podcast. In fact, I'm asking you to consider some of my books and other products as being part of the gifts you give this year at Christmas. It may seem far off, but most people make plans for a significant vacation about a year in advance. So if you haven't already expressed interest in traveling with us in October 2025, now is the time to do so. We want to have about 30 people total because this size group works best for the specific tour I have in mind. We'll be walking the footsteps of the Apostle Paul. I'm using the time between now and February 2025 to determine if we have enough interest, and the trend indicates we definitely should. We have just about 30 people on the list now, but I'd like to have more because when it comes to the actual day of making a commitment, things could have changed, and I want to be able to have at least 30 actually attend the tour. So, if you think you'd like to be part of the Faith to Live By Christian tour with me in Greece during October 2025, now's the time to get your name and number in your party on the list. There's no obligation at this point, you're just expressing your interest. While the specific details are subject to change, as it stands now, the week-long tour will include 4 nights at Divani Palace Acropolis Hotel in Athens, which includes breakfast, 1 night at Amelia Hotel in Delphi, which includes breakfast, 1 night at Grand Meteora Hotel in Kalambaka with breakfast, 2 nights at Mediterranean Palace Hotel in Thessaloniki, that includes breakfast, 2 dinners at local restaurants, tour guide throughout, deluxe coach throughout, admissions to museums and sites, tips to guides, drivers, and restaurants, and all local taxes. Estimated cost per person double occupancy room is about $3,000. Attendees need to arrange their own air travel to and from the Athens International Airport. To get your name on the list, send an email to faithtoliveby@PamelaChristianMinistries.com with the word Greece in the subject line. In the body of the email, provide your name, contact information, and number of people you expect to be in your party. This will place your name on the interested in attending list, but does not obligate you in any way. It merely assures you have first right of refusal come February 2025 when down payments are due. If you didn't get the details written down that I just shared, simply visit my Beyond the Podcast page using the link in the show notes. If you like what you hear from me with this podcast, I highly recommend my book series, my award-winning blog, and consider signing up for my certificate course in apologetics. My aim with that course is to help people learn how not only to use apologetics to share truth with others, but to help Christian leaders incorporate apologetics into their respective ministries so more Christians are learning how to share their faith. You can learn more by using the link in the show notes. For now, I offer my weekly podcasts, my blog, and bi-monthly e-newsletter at no cost. And certainly I have hard costs associated with doing all I do. If you've been blessed by my work and would like to help my work reach others, why not consider partnering with me? For as little as $10 a month, you can become a partner. Then together we can reach even more people for Jesus. Simply visit my Pamela Christian Ministries homepage and then click on the Give button at the top menu bar. Or if you prefer, you can go directly to the Give page using the link in the show notes. To become a partner, you can use my PayPal or Venmo account, but you will also see other ways you can support my work on that page. Whether you choose to become a monthly partner, give a one-time donation, purchase my books and products from my web store, or support my affiliate sponsors, anything you can do to help me continue this work would be greatly appreciated. And as always, your prayers and telling others about me and my ministry work is much needed. When it comes to my selection of affiliate sponsors, I first look for Christian-owned and operated businesses, and I make a point of personally using the products or services so I can fully endorse them. I seek sponsors that offer products or services you can get via the internet worldwide, and I specifically consider what is common to most people universally. So you'll find health, beauty, and wellness products through Dr. Zelenko's Z-Stack supplements and from Operation Tomahawk and from QE Strong. Dr. Zelenko's Z-Stack supplements are truly amazing and are available to my listeners for a 5% discount per purchase or a 10% discount for a monthly subscription using the promo code FTLB. Operation Tomahawk is a membership purchase program with an American-owned and operated company offering personal and household care products that are not made of toxins or genetically modified ingredients. Stop buying national brands from corporations that are part of the deep state cabal. Use the link in the show notes, and from the drop-down menu under How Did You Hear About Us, select Pamela Christian, Faith to Live By. You may have heard my interview with Rob Renee about QE Strong. Discover the benefits of quantum energy to overcome all sorts of ailments. Visit QEstrong.com and use the promo code FTLB at checkout to receive your discount. Then, my newest affiliate I'm really excited to bring you is Q Streaming. That's CUE Streaming Television. People with United States addresses can get over 3,000 channels, including live TV with streaming television without a contract. Get all of your local networks and favorite movie and sports and pay-per-view channels for about half of what cable costs. See the video promo link in the show notes to learn more. Affiliate sponsors only provide financial support to me when you purchase what they offer. So before you support Amazon or any other retailer, if I offer what you're looking for, please purchase through me. When it comes to special occasions, birthdays, or Christmas gifts, consider my books, jewelry, CDs, and more from my web store or any of the affiliate goods and services I offer. When you purchase from my web store, be sure to use the promo code TRUTH, TRUTH, to receive a 20% discount. Again, you'll find all the links in the show notes. If you like the content and resource material I bring you with this podcast, you'll find much more by connecting with me through my blog. In fact, my blog has been awarded 2 unsolicited awards for Christian content. And I'm also very active on social media. I can cover much more on social media than I can with this weekly podcast. And if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe to my complimentary bi-monthly e-newsletter. I offer encouragement, special offers, and one of my signature recipes with each and every edition. Yep, I'm a foodie and I love to entertain, which is why Faith, Family, Friends, and Food is a bonus segment of my bi-monthly e-newsletter. To receive even more, please be sure to check out my dedicated podcast listeners page, Beyond the Podcast. Here's where we can connect exclusively and you can download complimentary devotionals, resources, and more. On that page, I also ask you to help me learn more about you and what you want by completing the form visible once you scroll down that page. And something that is very easy for you to do and would mean a lot to me is for you to rate, subscribe, or comment on this podcast according to what your preferred listening platform allows. You know how it works. The more likes and subscriptions to this podcast, the more opportunity we have to expand the listening audience. And that means we can reach more people with the gospel message of Jesus while helping people learn how to better apply their Christian faith. I hope you'll join me next week and tell your friends and family to listen right here on Faith to Live By, where we learn how to gain spiritual victory over life's issues. Until next week, I'm Pam Christian, asking you to remember, Christ died for us. The least we can do is live for Him.